All right, I've been getting a lot of questions about ABLS and how to use it properly in a Nissan vehicle. This particularly applies to the Nissan Navara or the Nissan Frontier or the R51 Nissan Pathfinder. And as well as if you're in the United States, we also have the N50 or the second generation Nissan Xterra that uses the ABLS system in conjunction with the rear locker. Same thing with the Navara and the Nissan Frontier. So, ABLS is just an electronic limited slip, or in other words, it's a brake-based traction control system. Now, when using it, there's a couple different modes to it, and it's all based on your actual transfer case. So if you are in 4 high, then all you have to do is make sure you put VDC off, the vehicle dynamic control and stability control. You want that off while you're driving off pavement. If you're on dirt, driving around in 4 high, hitting a lot of bumps, your system will start to think that the vehicle is losing control because the vehicle's moving around off-road, and the yaw control sensors and all the other access sensors built in to your vehicle will start telling it that something's off if you're trying to drive down a dirt road, because it thinks you're driving on paved road and moving around. The other thing is in 4 low, it automatically disengages VDC, so you don't have to worry about that. But the way it drives is it reads off of the wheel speed sensors. You got on the R51, which is what I'm going to be talking about mostly today, but it applies to all the vehicles that I mentioned, is that you have 2 wheel speed sensors on the rear diff there, and the actual ring gears on the outside on the axle or the drive shafts, leaving the independent rear axle. And then on the front end, they're in the hubs, and that's the same for the Navara and the Frontier as well. So the system just measures that and applies brake force distribution to each wheel depending on the wheel speed and the differential wheel speed. So the way to drive this properly is to actually, you have to drive with the throttle. A lot of people think that if you keep, switching between gas and brake, that for some reason it works better, and it really doesn't. As soon as you touch the brake pedal or even get near it, or even if you're driving a manual transmission, you clutch kick it or even clutch in, and that automatically resets the ABLS system. It just stops its program, and it won't activate and start moving the torque around or the power around between each wheel. So you have to be really committed when using ABLS. You can't be going partially on the throttle and then jumping over to the brake. You want to maintain throttle. If you want to slow down, you can let off, but don't touch your clutch pedal, don't touch your brake pedal. It disengages the system. So, and that's the number one thing I see when I see videos and people talking about how ABLS sucks. It usually has to do with driver error. You just have to drive through it. Best way to do it if you're driving a manual transmission is see how fast you need to go clutched out, and then try to maintain that speed while you're going through the incline or obstacle. If you have to clutch in, then I recommend reversing the vehicle back off the obstacle and just picking a different line. Whatever you have to do to maintain your throttle input to get through the obstacle, that'll allow ABLS to work. If you are midway through the obstacle and you hesitate and you hit the brakes, like I said, it will disengage the system and you will be stuck in that spot. It won't pick up fast enough to get going again. It's not as good as I would say something from like Land Rover, but it is a fairly good system. It's better than most systems that I've dealt with. But yeah, using ABLS, it's fairly good in a lot of situations. You rarely have to engage a locker if you're working with like a Navara, an Xterra, or a Nissan Frontier that have factory locking rear differentials. A lot of the people that know how to use ABLS rarely engage their rear differential. The downside to using ABLS is actually on descents. So if you're going downhill, like I said, you have to use throttle input for ABLS to work. If you're going downhill and you come up on an obstacle that stops you, you will have to throttle over it unless you have a locking rear differential. So that's something you really got to think about when you're negotiating obstacles. If you're in an R51 Pathfinder, they don't have locking differentials, so coming downhill and negotiating obstacles, that's definitely the downfall of ABLS. Another thing is if you're on really loose surface, say you're climbing a really steep incline and it's got a lot of that, I guess you could call it marbles, a lot of loose round rocks that'll just spin out from the tires, keeps you from touching the ground. ABLS is just awful on that kind of terrain. The best way to get over that is just momentum. There's nothing you can really do. ABLS only works in moderate traction situations. Also, you don't want to have opposite axles in the air when you're using ABLS. If you can, try to maintain at least 3 points of contact on the ground. That is the best way to get through it. Chances are you're never going to get stuck if you have 3 points of contact. Even if you do a way where you can just transition the vehicle, if you are driving up and one of the front axles leaves the ground and then you're getting over the obstacle and you have enough momentum to kind of tip the vehicle over where you can get that front wheel on the ground and then a rear lift, as long as you've already transitioned, ABS will pick up immediately. You don't have to worry about it. It's when you have opposite axles with opposite wheels in the air that it hesitates just a little bit more and struggles, but otherwise it still manages to figure it out. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. But if you have any more questions about driving ABLS, let me know in the comment section. More than happy to go through it with you guys. Another thing is I've been thinking about it, and probably going to get it too, is getting one of those pedal boxes or whatever, command pedal. A couple of different brands out there that run it, but I want to be able to tune the throttle input in 4 low, because a lot of these vehicles are either diesel or the 4-liter petrol V6, and they tend to be a little bit on the touchy side, especially the petrol version. It's a little bit touchy on the throttle, and it's really easy to overpower ABLS. If you go more than half throttle on ABLS, the system will just disengage. It won't continue to push it through, so you don't burn out your brakes or something. So you don't really want to hit too much throttle. The more throttle control you have, the better ABLS works. And that sounds kind of counterintuitive, I know. But the least amount of throttle input is the best way to get ABLS to work properly. You'll notice that you'll have way less wheel spin, especially the one in the air. And if you're transitioning over an obstacle, you don't want that wheel, especially the front wheel, you don't want that wheel spinning too fast and coming down. You'll blow a spider gear. I mean, these vehicles are notorious for having a weak front differential, so that's something you just don't want to do. So manage your throttle input, constant throttle input until you get over the obstacle is the best way to do it. So anyways, if you have any other questions, let me know. Hopefully that explanation helps a bit with managing your ABLS and your off-road trips, and you'll notice probably a performance increase because you're using it correctly while you're off-road if you go and use the tips that I've explained in this video of just managing the throttle input, just constant input. Don't hit the clutch pedal, don't hit your brake pedal, just manage your throttle through the obstacle and you'll make it just fine. So anyways, have a good day, guys.